Oh, man. Hey, this morning we are starting this series. I love worshiping with you guys. This morning we are starting this series called Thumb War, and we're talking about how do we fight back against the things that are distracting from us. How do we fight back when distraction attacks? And so we're going to jump into that. I want to pray just so, for the very least, so I can kind of change my mode of thinking, and for us to just get ready for this message today. So you guys bow your heads. Lord, it's good to just worship you and remember that the stone was rolled away. That tomb is empty. It was empty last Sunday, and it's empty this Sunday, and it will be empty for all of time because you have the power over death. And we praise you for that. And we want to not forget that in our day-to-day lives. I pray that this morning, as we look at just one of the ways that we get distracted so easily, that God, we would start to really attack those things in our lives so we could find meaningful opportunities and make the most of them, that we wouldn't waste our time on this earth. I love you, Jesus. It's in your name that I pray. Amen. So occasionally I enjoy finding out some information from you guys more than just me throwing information at you. So I want to ask you a question, and I'm going to have you raise your hand, okay? Very simple. So how many of you on a normal work day get up before 8 a.m.? How many of you are up before 8 a.m.? I know a few of you are night workers, so you're like, I am just way before. All right, so how many of you get up before, can I go to 7? How many of you are up before 7 a.m. on a normal work day? Oh, you poor people. All right, how many of you are up before 6:30? Let's do 6:30. Okay, we'll get to you. How many of you are up at 6? 5:30. 5. Oh, a few of you still, are you still have your hands up? 4:30. Get out of time. 4 o'clock. Anybody? You're up at 4 or before 4? Anybody back there? That little guy, he's up. He's like, I am. Are you up at 4? 4:10. I'll give it to you, man. All right, everybody, let's all stop and pray for Cody this morning. Man, some of you are up early, aren't you? I'm a 6 o'clocker for the most part. I know, the one thing that I know that I can get up and I could say any day of any year is that from the moment you wake up to the moment that you go to sleep, your life is fairly full. Your life has stuff that's going on, and if you don't have something planned, something is going to pop up into your life to take over and to kind of take your schedule and make it its own. Yeah, would you say? I mean, one of the things that most of us struggle with day in and day out is just kind of the stress of having things to do. Maybe you've retired and maybe that doesn't hit you anymore. I don't know. But I would say probably 90% of us in here are struggling with what to do with our time and how to manage it and how to make sure that we're being productive but still focusing on the important things. I mean, it can become a very stressful issue in your life, right? Because you've got ball practices for kids to get to, and you've got work that you have to make sure and be there, and your boss is asking for overtime, so you're putting in overtime. Then you've got a stack of bills. Somebody needs to sit down and pay those, and there's laundry. Somebody's got to do laundry, and hey, who's cooking dinner tonight? You want to go to Pizza Hut? Let's just go to Pizza Hut. There's a million different things that are kind of vying for your attention in this world. And one of the interesting things about all human beings is that there are a lot of resources that are kind of endless for us. If you want, you can go out and make more money. I know it might seem hard right now. You're going, no, can't. I really can't. But you really could go out and figure out a way to make more money, right? So you can spend money, and it's a little bit endless if you want it to be. If you want to work hard and you want to do a good job, you likely can put money back in your pocket if you spend it. But your time is something that once it's spent, it's spent. You can't get back this last second. Some of you are already thinking, oh, I know, I wish I could get back the last 5 minutes, Wagner. All right, Thumb Wars video was a little goofy. You can't get back time, can you? There's nothing you can do to earn more. There's nothing you can do to work harder to get more time. You could try staying up, but it's not like you get more time. You're just trying to figure out how to make better use of your time. This morning, I want us to talk, as we talk about this idea of Thumb Wars, that there are things fighting for your attention, fighting for your little bit of time that you have in this world. I want us to talk about the things specifically that distract us from doing what's important. You know, some of you, how many of you, if I say the word phone, you think of a thing that goes like this, do, 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 and then when you pick it up, it has a little dial tone that goes, eh. How many of you think of that when I say phone? Anybody? Okay. My daughter came up to the church office, no joke. Piper came up, and she was like, "What's that, Dad?" And I kind of giggled, and I said, "It's a phone." And she picked it up and put it to her ear, and she was like, "What?" Because the phones, my daughter knows, these don't have a little tone that they make, right? They don't make noise when you put them up to your ear until you do something with them. How many of you, when I say phone, the first thing you think about is one of these things? Has a screen on it, yeah? Okay, all right, so we got a few on each camp. I was thinking about the things that distract us. And for those of you who this is your phone, this is the thing that you think of when you think of phone, I want to ask you, how much time do you spend where you have other stuff that you could be doing, or maybe you're just kind of relaxing, and you don't even know it, but your hand goes into your pocket, and somehow pretty quickly your fingers are moving on it. Your thumbs are moving. Anybody have that problem? Yeah, no? Nobody? I can leave? Yeah, somebody. Yeah, I see the honest. Okay, that's me. You see, I think about this often. Because, and it kind of comes, it's a major part of our lives. Actually, they're saying that the average teenager is spending 4 to 6 hours on one of these things. Is that incredible to you? 4 to 6 hours. Some of you are not shocked because you're like, "Oh, I do like 8. I mean, I can beat that. That's nothing." 4 to 6 hours on one of these things, glued not to a person's face, but to a screen. It's pretty impressive, isn't it? I was thinking about this. It is almost. I will find that in my life, I almost innately just go to this. I don't know if you find this. If you have one of these, how many of you like Facebook? Are there any Facebookers? Are there Instagrammers? Are there Twitterites? So I go almost, and I promise you, if you're not in this world, if you're like, I don't care about the tweeting and the twittering, if you're not in that world, it's okay, because we'll get around to everybody in a second. But I want to talk specifically to you folks who are engaged in the screen thing, all right? There is a reason, I think, that most of us default to this as something that we pull out of our pocket when we're bored. It is not a new thing for us to have happen as human beings. I read this book about the neurology and the pathways of the brain, and one of the things, hi Terry, you're calling me? Did I leave something? She's calling my phone, hilarious. Hilarious. Luckily my watch tells me, so I just hung up on you. There's this book, and this guy studied the brain, and what they did was they hooked people up, and they put them into an MRI. And they gave people tasks to perform while they were in the MRI. So add these numbers together, do these tell me the color of the shape that's in front of you. And so people would lay there, and they would do the activity, and then they would take the thing away that the activity that they were asking people to do. Now the subject thought that what they were supposed to be doing was the activity. They thought that's what was being studied, was how their brain reacted to the activity. What the researchers were actually doing was studying what happened in between activity for human beings. And what they found was very interesting, was the part of the brain that lights up when we're engaged in social activity. That part of the brain would light up the instant that somebody stopped doing an activity. And it wasn't just like if you had 5 minutes in between. It was like if there was a second of downtime, the part of your brain that engages with social activity would light up, and it would light up for the time until a new activity came in, and instantly your brain would stop with the social activity, and it would go back. And so you might instantly start thinking about, how do I look today? Do I look okay? Because you're thinking socially. Does this make sense? You might think, did I say the wrong thing to her? I mean, I thought she looked pregnant. You ever done that one? You asked her if she was pregnant, she wasn't, and oh man, and you're going through it. Do you remember, maybe some of you, I don't know if high schoolers, if you guys have this happen. I had this happen in high school all the time, because high school is this giant rat social experiment, right? Where they put you in there with a bunch of other rats, and you guys just go at it, and there's a few adults trying to keep you sane. And I remember every single night I would get home from high school, and I would do my homework and stuff, and I would lay down in bed, and do you know what I would do for at least an hour? My brain would cycle through every single thing I had done that day. Do you guys have that happen to you ever? Do you? No? You don't have time, you just get on Facebook, don't you? No, just kidding. See, we are naturally programmed to run through social interactions and to think about how our life is engaging with the social world around us. And so what I'm trying to get at is for lots of you, the problem is you have supplanted what God intended to be a natural thing that you did kind of in your downtime to this. And this is why Facebook is so successful. Because you and I get on and we look through our social world. The problem is when I'm doing that mentally, and Keith comes up and starts talking to me, I can disengage with it in a second. When you are doing it physically, it's very difficult to disengage, isn't it? Sometimes, I'm not speaking from experience, but sometimes your wife will ask you the same question like 10 times and you just didn't hear her, you know? It never happened to me, but sometimes that happens to people. And you know why? Because you were wired to be social. You were wired for this, but the problem is God didn't wire you to be social with a screen. God wired you to be social with other people. You see, one of the things that I'm really worried about with this next generation, and that's why for some of you who this doesn't even apply, you're going, Ken, I don't even care. I'm worried about it so much that I'm willing to kind of for a moment leave you out of the discussion. I'm very aware that I'm doing that. I'm very aware of that. But I'm doing it because I'm so worried, and probably you're worried too because you watch us younger people glued to our devices. I'm worried that you and I, who are glued to our devices, we are missing crucial God moments in our life because we are gluing ourselves to a silly thing of plastic and glass. Yeah? I worry sometimes that we're missing incredibly meaningful opportunities that are coming up all around us. And I don't mean big things. I mean like your child coming up and just wanting to talk to you. Daddy, can I tell you about my day? Yeah, well, go ahead, whatever. Yeah. Uh-huh. I mean your wife wanting to share how her, just kind of what's on her heart. She finally got to, and you can't kind of pull it away to just listen to her and talk. I mean, you're out with your friends. And one of them is heartbroken. She won't tell anybody, though, because everybody at the table, all the other ladies are doing this. Everybody get in, everybody. And there's a whole bunch of people right around you. See, I'm worried, folks, that we are missing meaningful opportunities in our life. I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about how do you get to where you are able to really focus on what's important. Because all of us do this. This is not a new problem for us to get engaged in the wrong thing. Some of you, maybe you got engaged in a hobby. You going out shooting guns and hunting, and you'd leave your family at home, right? This is not a young man's problem. It's just we have something we carry in our pocket all the time. This is not a young woman's problem. This is you just were so busy kind of managing life that you never engaged with your children. You didn't volunteer because you didn't want to get taken advantage of. This is not a young woman's problem. This is just a human problem. And we all get to where we get so engaged in stuff that doesn't matter as much. And so I was thinking about how do you actually choose what you're going to focus on, and how do you get to a point where you're not just taking shots in the dark. You see, I went shooting the other day. Anybody love to go shooting? Oh, baby, you get me a gun. And it was not just shooting. It was blowing up tannerite. Do you know what I'm talking about? Can I get it? Oh, yeah, if you know. All right, yeah. So tannerite, if you don't know, is an explosive. You pour it together, you mix it all up, and then you put it out and you shoot it. And when you shoot it with a bullet, it will explode. It is like every man's dream, right? Before I went and did this, I had watched a video where some yahoos had put the tannerite in a lawnmower. Have you seen that video? And they shot it. They were like 40 feet away, and the lawnmower blew up and blew the guy's leg off. Made it a little bit more exciting for me. You know what I'm talking about? I was ready for it. So I'm out there, and we've shot everything. We're shooting 9mm, 45s. We shot the old cowboy gun, and it was awesome. And finally, we get the assault rifle out, and we put some tannerite out, and I'm like, check this out. And I just put the gun up to my shoulder and I take aim. We're like 45 yards maybe, 40 yards away. And I'm like, I'm just going to hit it. I'm not going to rest against anything. I'm just going to shoot this bad boy one shot. I get up there, I take aim, and I'm looking at it, take my shot, and I miss. I'm like, I got it, no problem. I take another shot, miss. I start just pumping off shots, and I'm missing it, and I can't get it. And finally, my buddy says, Kent, stop trying to be cool. Why don't you just leave? We'd driven one of those Gator kind of ATV type vehicles, and he says, why don't you just rest up against that? And so you've done this before, right? You've gotten on the hood of your trunk, or you put a couple sticks up, you lean your shot up against it. And so I put my hand on there, and I put the gun in the crease, and I line up, and I take the shot, and it was like heaven. The whole thing just explodes. We're going crazy. But do you know what it took for me to get the right shot? It took me finding real stability. Yeah. Because you see, when I put my hand up against this thing that was stable, the stability of that thing transferred to my body. Because before that, what was happening was my shot would dip as I breathed, right? Or my shot would move and wiggle as the wind was blowing. And I had no stability in the gun. I couldn't actually line up my shot and hold that target on it because I had no stability. But the moment that I placed myself up against something that was stable and I took its stability and I transferred it into myself, the moment I did that, I could line up the shot and hit it. Listen to this. Psalm 14:2 says this, the psalmist says that the Lord looks down from heaven on the entire human race. God is sitting up in his throne room. And do you know what he's got on the television channel? You and I. He is watching us from heaven. Listen to what he's looking for. He is watching, he's looking down from heaven on the entire human race. He looks to see if anyone is truly wise. And look what he means by is truly wise. If anyone seeks God. God up in heaven is looking down at you and I. And he's looking to see if you are truly wise. If you are truly a person who understands, but not only understands, but put it into practice. And what he says by wise is that if anyone, get this, God is looking around and he's just like, does anyone around here seek me? Does anyone seek me? You see, I believe that you and I, most of the time, we may claim to follow Christ. We may claim to say, you know what, I've really been getting back into church and this God thing, and I've been trying to find my way back home to him. We may be doing all of that stuff, but most of us, most of the time, are not really seeking God with our hearts. Would you agree with that? Now, I'm not saying that you're bad for that. I'm saying I'm in the same boat. Most of us struggle with this. Most of us struggle to figure out how to seek God, but I'm telling you, here's the problem. Most of us are out there in reality taking aim at life, and we're not leaning up against the thing that could actually give stability to our shot. Have you ever thought about that? When you were out there and you haven't spent any time with God, you haven't sought God in your life, you haven't gone before him in prayer, you haven't read his word, you haven't just engaged in. When you go out and try to live life apart from God, you're out there trying to line up your shot without any stability. And I'm telling you, most of us are maybe getting close, but oftentimes we're missing. I want to show you something. This comes from Jesus' life. See, Jesus, I know a lot of people, he almost kind of feels unreal, because maybe you've heard it as stories. I try, as I talk about Jesus, to help bring in the realness of who he was, kind of the dirt of the day, so you can feel it and see it and think about him. But I think a lot of times we just see him as this religious figure. You see him maybe in a temple in your mind. You see him talking before religious people. He's doing that kind of stuff. But I don't know if you've ever thought about the real, true demands that Jesus had on his life as a leader. Listen to this. This comes from Luke chapter 5, 12 through 16. Luke says this. While Jesus was in one of the towns, a man came along who was covered with leprosy. When he saw Jesus, now this guy, I want you to know, this guy, because he has leprosy, the requirement for him would be that he's not supposed to get close to people. He is supposed to, as they walk up to him, say, unclean, unclean, so that they wouldn't get his cooties. Got it? So they don't want you to get my germs. I'm going to say unclean. You stay away from me. This guy, a man came along who was covered with leprosy. When he saw Jesus, he fell with his face to the ground and begged him, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Yeah, I just get the picture. This guy has not touched another human being, at least one like you and I. He may have touched some other sick people. They probably lived in a colony somewhere out by the trash heaps or something like that where they were away from people. But this guy hasn't had a real loving touch, like somebody just putting their hand on their shoulder or something. He sees Jesus coming. He's heard the rumors. He may have even seen some of the miracles that Jesus performed. And this guy steps outside of his comfort zone. He is likely going to get backlash from this. He steps out and he falls down before Jesus. And he says, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Jesus reached out his hand. You should underline this in your Bible. It is such a tender moment. Jesus reached out his hand and he touched the man. Do you see that? Jesus touched this guy who nobody had touched for probably like the last several years minimum. I don't know how long it's been going on. But so much so that when he's coming before Jesus, he's falling down on his face before him. He knows he shouldn't be there. Jesus reached out and he touched the man. I'm willing, he said, be clean. And immediately the leprosy left him. Then Jesus ordered, don't tell anyone, but go show yourself to the priests and offer the sacrifices that Moses commanded for your cleansing as a testimony to them. Yet the news about him spread all the more, so that crowds of people came to hear him and to be healed of their sickness. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and he prayed. Jesus is in this place where his position and his power is rising drastically. I would even posit to you that it's rising exponentially. That Jesus is in a place where people are hearing about the things that he's doing and they are wanting to be around him, right? So this is what I'm saying. Like we kind of divorce Jesus of his humanity, and we talk about him as God, which he was, but he also was completely human. And Jesus is in this place where he had so much time. You know how he tells the guy not to tell people? Did you pick up on that? I always thought that was weird until one day it hit me. Jesus had so much time to accomplish what he needed to accomplish. So early on in his ministry, he would tell people, don't go tell anybody that I did this for you. And I think it's because Jesus understood that if people began to see the kinds of things that he could do, that they would feel threatened. And that the establishment would eventually raise up and kill him. And Jesus needed 3 years with 12 guys to change the world. And so Jesus pushes back and says, don't tell anybody. It's not time. Don't tell anybody. Jesus has all of the pressure. Think about all the stuff that you have in your life right now. All the people that demand something of you. Your children, your employees, your boss, your wife, your husband. All the demands that you have on you. Jesus has incredible demands. As a matter of fact, in this chapter alone, Luke mentions 3 times the pressures that Jesus is under. You might not pick it up. Maybe you should go back and read this chapter later on this week. One of them, Jesus is preaching by a seashore, and the crowds are so great that they start to press on him, and he's being pushed up against the sea. Can you imagine this? I don't know how it happened, but I picture him kind of falling into a boat and him being like, all right, stands up and is like, push me out to shore, baby. And so he goes out onto the lake to preach because the crowd's so great. Do you know what it's like to be under pressure? Because Jesus does. He comes, he heals a leper, and Luke says this, in verse 15, that the news spread about him all the more so that the crowds of people came to hear him. Crowds! How many of you love a crowd? How many of you love being in a crowded store, right? This is why we shop on Black Friday, because we love the crowds, right? But most of us don't like the crowd. Jesus is being crowded out. The next thing that we find out is that Jesus is in a house and he's preaching in the house and he's in there and he's teaching and it is so crowded again. So many people, so many demands on his time, so much pressure. I want you to get the kind of pressure this guy was under. So much that there are some guys who want to get to him. They want to get to him so bad. You know the story potentially that he digs a hole. These guys dig a hole in the roof to drop a guy down to Jesus. Isn't that awesome? You think your life has pressure on it? Imagine that kind of pressure. There were nights when Jesus didn't get to eat because he was doing ministry and healing people. There was a time, get this, there was a time, some of you have experienced incredible loss in your lives. There's a time when Jesus' cousin, the guy who initiated his ministry, had died. Not just died, but they beheaded him. Gruesome. Jesus and his buddies get in a boat. Jesus is like, let's go to the other side of the lake. They go to the other side of the lake. When they get out, there are 5,000 people there. You might know this story. He ends up getting out, and the scripture says he saw that they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he had compassion on them. And Jesus, in the middle of his grief even, I can't do it. I'm telling you, I can't even do it. I look at him and I'm like, I don't know how you dealt with the pressure of the leadership that you were under. If you feel like you're under pressure, Jesus knows what it's like. But I want you to see what Luke did. He's so sharp. Luke was a doctor, if you didn't know this. And he's so sharp. He juxtaposes two events for us. Did you see it in verse 15 here? In verse 16? Yet the news about him spread all the more, so that the crowds of people came to hear him and to be healed of their sickness. Luke focuses in on the pressure that Jesus is under. You got a lot of stuff to do for school, Jesus understands it, right? You got a lot of bills on the table, Jesus understands the pressure. You got a lot of people asking you to do stuff and you don't feel like you can get it done, Jesus understands the pressure. He understands the distractions in life. He is being crowded out. And do you see what Jesus does with it? But Jesus, this is the juxtaposition. On this side, all of the crowds, all the distractions, all the things that are calling for him. On this side, how Jesus handles it. Verse 16, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and he prayed. See, I believe that the more demanding Jesus' life became, the more face time he demanded with the Father. And I don't mean demanded like he was like, God, you have to give me more time. I believe he demanded it in his schedule. The more demanding Jesus' life became, the more face time he demanded with the Father. How many of you react that way when your life gets full of pressure? I know I don't. You know what I do? I ignore it. I run away. Sometimes I work harder. Sometimes I try more. But do you know what my default is not? To demand more face time from the Father. Do you know what I need to do? To demand more face time from the Father. I need to carve out my schedule. So much so that, I mentioned that Jesus would stay up late in the night sometimes healing and not even eating dinner. There's a place where that happens in the scripture. And the thing that Mark says about it is that the next morning, Jesus has stayed up late into the night. The next morning, he got up early before anybody else was awake. And he went off and he prayed. This is who Jesus was. Oh, you see, this is what people want to be great leaders. Maybe that's not on your radar, maybe it is. But great leaders are not great leaders just because they are. They're great leaders because their habits allow them to be great leaders. Jesus understood that he couldn't deal with the pressures out here if he hadn't gone to the Father and settled himself in here. Does that make sense to you? You see, my goal this morning is to call you guys, to call myself, to find more face time with the Father. When was the last time you literally got down on your knees and just prayed to God? Just laid out before him all the things that are stressing you out to the point where you got past those things so that you could actually just talk to God. Maybe never. When was the last time you opened up the scriptures early in the morning and you just said, God, I need to hear from you. I need your word today before I engage with the world. I need your word before I hit the world. When was the last time? When was the last time that you spent some time memorizing scripture? Here's what I'm doing so you know. I'm giving you things that you can actually go do. Okay, these are practicals, all right? So if you're thinking, but Kent, what do I do with that? How do I demand more face time? These are some ways. You can pray. You can read the scripture. You can take a passage. I used to write passages on note cards, and I would put them in little like Ziploc baggies. So while I was in the shower, I could take those cards and I could think about passages from the Bible, and I could memorize them. What are you doing in your life to find and demand more face time from the Father? I guarantee you have time. I know that's the old excuse. Well, I just don't have time, or I can't find time. I was sharing with some guys this. One of my practices right now is that I read the scriptures in front of my kids. I don't go off into a closet. I know Jesus asked us to do that in prayer. He didn't say anything about that with the scripture. So I actually, in the mornings, get my Bible out and I read it while my kids are going crazy and stuff. And they know if they come up to me, I'm going to say, hey guys, I'm reading my Bible. I'll give you a hug and we'll play in just a second, but I'm reading my Bible. You know why I do that? Not because it's easier for Kent. I get way less out of it. I'm doing it because I want my kids to know that I am a man who demands FaceTime with my Father. I demand it. What does your practice look like with Jesus? Because see, last week we came in here and we had a lot of people here and it was fantastic. It was awesome. We have a pretty good crowd today and this is fantastic and it's awesome. But I don't care about packing a place out. Do you know that? I don't care about the crowds. I care about disciples. I care about us actually coming home to Him. And it's one thing to say, I want to come home to God. I want to come back home to God. It's another thing to take practical steps to do it. You can journal. How many of you have ever journaled? Maybe you've done this, you've written a diary before for yourself, but you haven't ever done it as a part of your spiritual practices. This has been powerful kind of off and on in my life. I will journal and I will just write out my prayers to God. I'll just sit down and do it. Something else that I've done, and I'm not perfect. I was telling the guys this morning this too. I sometimes will go out to a dirt road, put my car in drive, and I'll just let it idle. And I'll just go down the road. And I'll just talk to God. God, I can't believe you thought of cows, you know. That's crazy that you came up with cows. I don't know how you did that. God, I love green. I love that you love green, you know. When was the last time, and I'm going to wrap it up. When was the last time you just demanded some FaceTime with God? Because the things in your heart that need healing, the things in your heart that need fixing, the hope that you're looking for, the answers that you're dying to have, they don't come by getting rich. They don't come by working harder. They don't come by having better and more relationships. They come by finding that when your life becomes demanding, you start to demand more time with the Father. And when you do that, it settles your life. You see, it all ties back together to the shot, right? It gives you a foundation for everything else you're doing. And what it allows you to do is to make meaningful choices in your life. Most of us don't have a problem knowing what's a meaningful, like playing with Facebook or playing with my child, easy to figure out what's meaningful, very difficult to be intentional with. Yeah? Very difficult. The only way you're going to get intentional with it is to set a foundation, not just once, but every single day, all day long, that you're working on knowing who Jesus is and having a relationship with Him, demanding FaceTime. This morning, I want to do something very practical. If you have one of these device thingy-majiggers, I'd like you to pull it out with me. All right? Unlock it. Don't call me. All right, Terry? Oh, I'm so mad. No, I'm just kidding. Get your phone out for a second. Do you know how to move icons on your phone? Yes? You guys are smart, right? So I'm going to get my icons ready. I want you to get yours ready to move. I want you to find your favorite social media app if you have one of these. For me, it's Facebook. It's what I default to, all right? I'm going to ask you to hide it on your phone. Now, you don't have to delete it. You don't have to get rid of it. It is okay to get on Facebook. I'm not saying that it's wrong. I want you to hide it so that you have to search for it the next time you go to use it, okay? And here is my purpose, and everybody do it. I'm doing it right now too. I did not do this before today. Put it in the middle of a bunch of other apps. Don't just put it at the end. Put it like by, something that's really hard. Mine's in between my Frozen app and a coloring book app, all right? It's going to be, I'm never going to find that, all right? So you move it on your phone, and here's why. I was trying to think, how could I practically give you guys something to remind you of this message that I need to demand more time with the Father this week. Here's what I want. Today, 5 minutes after you leave and you're bored and you're like, oh, remember that sermon? And you get on your phone and you go to find Facebook and you're like, where'd Facebook go? Oh, Pastor, right? In that moment, all right, I want you to think, have I spent time with the Father today? I want this to become a clarion call in your life to return to the Father. See, coming home isn't just a metaphor that we talk about. It is a real thing that we do. We've got these 4 steps that we think everybody needs to take: God, groups, growing, and going steps. This is a God step. That you would take a step to follow Jesus in your day-to-day life in a real way. So I'm asking you, next time you go to look for that Facebook app, ask yourself, have I really demanded time with the Father? Have I really demanded it? Maybe even you'll download the Bible app. I'm going to this week on Facebook because I know you're still getting on Facebook. I'm going to put on our church wall, so be sure to get on there and like that. I'm going to put each day kind of something that you could do or to think about to remind you of ways to engage with the Father this week, all right? So be sure to check that out. But one of the things that you could do is download the Bible app. It's called YouVersion. And you could put that where your Facebook app usually is, right? And then when you go to find Facebook and you're like, duh, the Bible, I should read it, right? I mean, just like all it takes is you actually doing this, spending time with the Father. One of the excuses I'm going to end kind of now, all right? I'll even put my guitar on so you guys can be sure I'm going to end. One of the things that I think lots of us will have the excuse of is, I just don't have time. So one excuse is, I don't know where to start. That's why on Facebook all week long, in the morning, I'm going to produce something that will give you a place to start every day. Here's a different thing you could do. Here's a different thing you could do. All right? So no excuse on that. But a lot of us, it's just, I don't have the time. You don't know how busy I am. They rely on me. I mean, when I get up at 4, it's to go, I work out, and then I go to work, and then I do my thing, and then I come home, and my wife's looking for me, and I got to do this and this and this, and I'm working, and people rely on me. Can I tell you a really sad secret? Someday, you're going to pass away. And there are going to be some people who are very sad about that. But the rest of the world will keep trucking right along, like you didn't even exist. That should break your heart, but it also should remind you that the important things that you invest in this world are not work. It's not success. It's not money. It's people. This is why God wired you to every time you have a down second to think about social things. Because God wired you for people. And God wired you, specifically if you're a Christian, to help other people find their way back home. But you can't help them do that if you don't have a relationship with the Father. You got it? I just want to remind you, you're not as important in this world as you think you are. It is okay to take the break. It is okay to stop and find a foundation. I was reminded of this on this weekend. I was reminded, I don't know what that was, but it's cool. Phone. I was reminded of this weekend because I have a youth pastor, and I was, he had this special birthday, and so his wife emailed out a bunch of us, Facebooked us, and said, hey, would you guys come to your youth pastor's birthday party, and let's surprise him. He just misses you guys. I think it'd be cool if he could talk to you guys. And we're all old people now. We used to be like these guys down here, and now we're like, have gray hair and stuff. And so we all get there. And my buddy is very successful now. He's not in youth ministry anymore. He owns a building company, builds houses, but he does ministry through it. It's a really cool thing. And so he walks up these stairs, and he turns around, and we all yell, surprise! And he goes, woo, like this. And then he realizes it's not his friends from Joplin that are yelling. It's all these people who have driven like 8 hours to see him. And they're all these people that he impacted 20 years ago. And some of us are in ministry today because of the impact that he had in our lives. Some of us are working in the workplace, and we're in ministry still because it doesn't matter where you work. You're in ministry. You know that? And there are all these people making this impact in the world. And he went from being like, woo! And he's not a guy that gets teary-eyed, but he started to get teary-eyed. Because you see, at the end of your days, it's not going to matter. He has plenty of money, but that's not what matters. Do you know what matters? He has made an impact in people's lives. Not all of us will get the ability to have that party where everybody cheers for us here on earth. Someday I think we're all going to get up to heaven, and there's going to be this whole host of people that you walk through, and they all start to do the slow clap, you know, because of the investment you made. Please don't miss out on those crucial opportunities that God places in front of you, because you're doing this. Let's fight the thumb war. Michelle?
Since God is looking at our phones,
Uh-huh.
when I opened mine, I had a message. These things aren't always bad.
Yeah.
You can do God's work.
Yeah.
Marley's grandma, you all know Marley, the little blonde girl I bring with me. She's asked me to pray for Marley. She says, please pray for Marley. She's having a rough time. She wants more than anything to be able to live with her mom. And time just can't get her act together. And she's really worried.
Yeah.
So I'd like this all to the Father first.
Yeah. We can pray for her today. So, yeah, they're not all bad. And there's a great opportunity for us to make a difference in this world. There are little children all the way up to big adults who need to find their way back home. Let's pray for Miss Marley real quick, and then we will finish with this invitation song.